Okay, so hey everyone, how you doing? And do you see we have a guest here? It's Mr. CF Chuck Apps, and he is a very big YouTuber. What is it? 99,000 subscribers or something like that. And
Almost up to 96, 7,000, something like that. Yeah.
96.
Pretty overwhelming.
That's amazing. He's about to get the plaque from Google saying he's a YouTuber. It's the modern equivalent of the gold records or the silver records or whatever it was. And he's going to tell us all about it today. I want to ask him some questions. I'm very interested in him. We're going to, in the ancient history way, we're going to find out all about CF apps. Now, Sir Chuck, tell us, when did you get interested in ancient mysteries? What age was it? And how long have you been doing it? And in what capacity?
That's a good question because the more I think about it, I think it was 10 years old. There was a show called In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock on Star Trek. And that was really the only place where you could find a show on TV about ancient mysteries. So we're talking early 80s here. And I think some of those mysteries just got ingrained in my brain. The Nazca lines, the Shroud of Turin was one thing that Leonard Nimoy looked into. And now, after I've researched it for 5 years, I think he did some of the best research on the Shroud of Turin. But that was a show, and I know a lot of people my age, who were growing up in the 80s and 70s and 90s, really remember that show as kind of the first thing that introduced them to ancient mysteries. So I think In Search of was a huge factor in my life now that I really think about it.
Awesome. So, In Search of, that was a brilliant show. There was Mr. Spock doing a show. I recall Captain Kirk also did a show, didn't he? He did some kind of documentary on ancient mysteries.
He did a few actually, yeah. And I'm not sure exactly what he looked into, but I think he narrated a show kind of on the Eric von Daniken ancient astronaut theory. I think he did.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was something like that. So, I've noticed on your channel you make a lot of videos about burial mounds, things people can see in America. You're obviously located in America, and you want to show people things they can visit, and you also want to document what's in America because lots of this it's not covered very well at all. So, do you explore these mounds yourself? And if so, where was the first ancient mound you saw or visited, uh, and what age did you start visiting them?
That's a good question because it was actually about 4 years into my YouTube career where I thought, why don't we look at this ancient American mystery? And I think the first site that I really looked at was Cahokia in Illinois. And they have a step pyramid mound right in Illinois that's has a base almost as big as the Great Pyramid in Egypt. And I was 40 something years old when I first, so it was a big, what the bleep moment, you know, how come I didn't know anything about this? And then just the further I looked into ancient American mysteries, I knew there was just a whole untold story that we knew nothing about growing up for very specific reasons. This country was founded on a principle that it was just a vast open land of, you know, but there were cities all over it and that were purposely covered up. And the more I look into it, the more I'm amazed that the ancient America scene is no different than the ancient Middle East, ancient China, ancient Europe, ancient anywhere. It's really all the same.
Yeah, you're very right. America was highly populated pre-Columbian, and North America was highly populated as well. Um, what do you think happened? Are you into catastrophism ideas? Do you have a theory on what might have occurred to demolish their societies and allow the way for people from Europe to move in?
Well, I think that when I first started looking into ancient America, I was trying to figure out maybe who was here pre-Columbus, what civilization from anywhere around the world could have been here. And I left it totally open-minded. The Chinese, Europeans, the Phoenicians, Egyptians, anybody, Hebrews, anybody. And then by the time I'm now 250 videos into my series, the question is, who was not here? This place was known about, maybe kind of kept secret, but the New World was not the New World. It was known about for a long time, and I think many different cultures were here over a vast expanse of time.
Do you ever, I can't quite recall, but do you ever make videos about, say, ancient writing in America, such as the Bat Creek inscription? And do you have theories about them and the origins?
Yeah, in fact, Scott Walter, who you might be familiar with, he does the show America Unearthed. Sometimes I get questions brought to me by subscribers or people saying, hey, we have this ancient tablet mystery. And I don't know the first thing about decoding ancient glyphs or, the geology that goes into determining how old those are. So I often message him because he's a, professional geologist and that's what he does for a living. And I get a lot of really good answers from him, kind of, this is a modern forgery, or this might be really interesting because the geology of it says it's really old. So he's kind of my go-to person in that. But that is a really good question because that is one of the hardest things to determine as a researcher when you have an ancient inscription. And I know there's like the Gosford glyphs in Australia, supposedly ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. And that is one of the hardest things to determine as a researcher, what exactly is, an ancient, maybe 2,000-year-old glyph or a modern forgery. That is something that I just don't have the knowledge to determine. So that's why I message Scott Walter on occasion, because he knows. Why not ask somebody who knows what they're talking about?
Awesome. What's your favorite site in America in terms of ancient archaeology?
That is a tough one. Probably Poverty Point, because that comes from maybe the same time as the 18th dynasty of Egypt, this powerful dynasty of Egypt, maybe around 3,400 years ago. And it's just a site that is just right there in the middle of America, and it seems so important. And these large mounds, I guess, circular mounds that were built up in rows, as much material was put into them as the Great Pyramid in Egypt. And it's just a big mystery, and we know so little about it. And it's just like any other ancient topic, just guesses are put into it. I think it could be much older, but ancient America is pretty fascinating. I think Poverty Point is one of the more fascinating sites, along with Cahokia. Excuse me. I've been up for a while. Well, long day.
That's interesting that they make. You mentioned it was in the middle of America. Is that that's like the Giza in the middle of Egypt, isn't it? That's there's something going on here, like some sort of geomancy is going on. Do you have any theories about any who the builders of Poverty Point might be?
I think that we look at the modern boundaries of the United States and Mexico, and we kind of have predetermined notions based on that. But I just think it was a northern branch of the Mesoamerican cultures, like the Mayans and the Olmecs. I just think there was a northern branch that got up into the present day United States, and just because of modern borders, we just can't kind of wrap our heads around it, maybe.
Yeah. Now, Brian Forster talks a lot about the huge, long-headed people of the past,
Yeah.
the ancient giants. Is there any hint of a similar culture in North America?
There is in northern Nevada, up by the Lovelock Caves and stuff, there is evidence of elongated skulls, and even in some of the normal Adena sites that I've talked about that go back 2,500 years, there's a little bit of hint of that, and I've showed burial mounds coming from 2,500 years ago where the skulls are very strange, and some of them are embedded with copper in their eye sockets and their nostrils, and it's pretty fascinating to look into.
That sounds like quite an interesting.
Some of them are 7 feet tall.
Wow.
I mean, some of them are, very well documented, over 7 feet tall too.
So you agree with the ancient giants theory?
Well, giants is all a matter of perspective. If somebody is 7'2" or 7'4", they're as tall as the biggest person today. So does that make him a giant? It's all a matter of perspective, but anybody that tall that long ago, that would have been highly unusual and looked at as some sort of, something special for sure.
Yeah. Is there any since the ancient giants or the long-headed people were in North America, they're actually also finding them in Bulgaria, in ancient graves and tombs. Do you think this was some kind of worldwide aristocracy that was, in a way, ruling the planet, and this indicated a sign of leadership and natural hierarchy, and native peoples everywhere would bow down to these tall beings with these strange heads?
You cannot ignore it just because of a lot of things are cross culture, even the pyramids. So I think maybe cultures are looking back to a previous time of something that was kind of ingrained in the culture. I mean, you cannot ignore it just because I've done videos, ancient China, ancient somewhere in Siberia, all over the world. It seems like they were doing this cranial binding, and that was maybe, a reverence to the gods of some sort.
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it, that the humans used to have these strange skulls, and that now it seems we've changed. We don't have them anymore. Have we been bred out, or has there been a catastrophe? What happened?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, a lot of people have talked about what happened 12,800 years ago, and that seemed to kind of like reset the earth in a way. And if we lost ancient species of large giant sloths and giant camels and mammoths, and they all went extinct at one moment, and they were all larger than the species today, beavers as big as Volkswagen cars, is it unreasonable to think that humans weren't bigger a long time ago? I don't think that's unreasonable at all. It's just something we know little about because we have little skeletal remains and stuff like that.
What's the oldest archaeological site that you've covered, say, in America?
Maybe a site in San Diego that there's evidence of humans working a mammoth tusk to get at the bone marrow, and that's about 130,000 years old.
Wow.
That was found at Archaeological. When they were building the highway in San Diego, they had some evidence of bones and human occupation. They called it an Archaeological. The Cerruti site, I believe that is the name of it, but Graham Hancock covered that in America before, and I made a video on it, but that 1,000 years.
Cheers, mate.
Fireball tonight, Charles. Fireball. I am in a chatty mood.
Awesome. Some of these YouTubers in Ancient Mysteries, lots of them seem to have ambitions to start a tour business, and they first of all, they want to take people to Egypt or Göbekli Tepe. Lots of authors are doing it. Do you have any ambition along these lines?
That's an interesting question, because for as long as I've been doing YouTube videos, for about 9 years, I have done this in my spare time, and people think that's kind of weird because I've uploaded over 2,000 videos now, and think, how can you do this in your spare time? But it's better this way because I don't feel pressured to do anything. I do it just enthusiastically. I'm just learning, just doing this. But going to ancient sites, I've talked to Ben at Uncharted X, and I've talked to Matt at Ancient Architects, and I've talked to a lot of people. I message JJ Ainsworth, her channel, and just about wondering about touring ancient sites, and I know I would love it. And I'm afraid if I go to ancient Egypt and I start looking into the pyramids, my friends and family would never, ever see me again.
Yeah, that's a possibility because there's a lot there in Egypt. There's a huge amount still remaining, and so much so that's their economy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one thing just to kind of do this from the background and look on Google Earth, but actually going there and having it right in front of you, I think I might dive into it a lot deeper than I would want to, maybe. But yeah, certainly has my interest. Touring ancient America sites, that is something that might be easy. I mean, I could go on a 12-hour drive from where I live in Las Vegas, and I could count maybe a dozen, a couple dozen sites where I could visit. So that is probably something I will do in the next year or two.
Oh, that's wonderful. I want to go on that tour. That's
Oh,
amazing.
come along, it'll be a party for sure.
Wow, yes, please. Now, when I was in near, I think it was near the Serpent Mound, there are ancient fortresses, hilltop fort. They seem to be hilltop fortresses, and on top of the hill, there's stonework.
Yep.
What sort of stonework have you encountered in, say, North America in your studies? Because you're maybe the world YouTube expert on ancient America. What have you found, and how sophisticated is it?
Well, a lot of the ancient pyramid mounds that we see just covered with grass, that kind of gives people the wrong perspective because they are built with clay and gravel and stonework. So a lot of those that we just see is covered in grass, they are actually very complicated, and they are actually aligned to the cardinal points and a lot like what we see in Egypt. But the stonework, that is pretty unique. There are sites in Georgia, Tennessee. I did a video about 6 weeks ago on a site in Ohio, the largest stone pyramid mound north of Mexico. And that is a video I did maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, where there was this report of a large stone pyramid that was removed for dam construction. And about 6 weeks ago, I did a re-investigation of that, and I found exactly where that was located. And the owner of the property verified that that stone pyramid mound is still there. So to me, looking at all of ancient America, like they built these pyramid mounds that had the same symbolic purpose as the pyramids in Egypt or the Mayan pyramids, but they just used the material that was available to them. And at a few lucky sites, they may have had a lot of limestone available to them. And in those instances, they built stone pyramid mounds or stone cairns or tumuluses, or same thing you see in ancient Britain, or stuff like that.
Yeah, very, very similar, I suppose. Now, around Lake Superior, there is a theory that there are ancient mines there, and that a huge amount of copper, gold, silver, which are all found together, nickel, I suppose, tin, sorry, not nickel. They all tend to be found together. This was a huge mining area. Have you found any evidence what this metal could have been used for, and what era it could correspond to?
Well, that's very interesting. My mother was raised in the UP of Michigan. She is a Youper, as they call them. All my relatives are from those copper area mines of very upper, the Keweenaw Peninsula. So that is something that I've mentioned probably in at least 2, 3 dozen of my videos, but I have not made a individual video on. It's still something I'm researching, and that is a great mystery. At first, I thought maybe some other culture, the Phoenicians or something, was responsible for all these mysterious mines that have been, just kind of left there and nobody knows who did them originally. But I think it was the Adena culture, ancient America cultures, for sure.
Do you think that they could have traded as far as the Inca world and the Central America world, which we know was extremely, it was as populated as today when Cortez arrived? Do you think they could have traded as far down as Central America, or even worldwide? Could we be looking at King Solomon's mines?
King Solomon's mines, I think, are associated to leaders of Egypt. I think what they say are King Solomon's mines can be directly. I think this is kind of a flipped history, but if you have ancient Great Lakes copper in Georgia or Florida, I don't think it's unrealistic to think it made it down to Mesoamerica or other parts of the world.
Indeed. To a little bit, do you have any opinion on orichalcum and where it might have originated?
No.
Fair enough. Well, it's a mysterious one, isn't it? We're still a bit in the dark about it.
Little, yeah. Nothing I have researched. No, I can't speak intelligently on that subject, Charles.
I'd love to hear your opinion on the Shroud of Turin, because a long time ago I researched it, and I thought that the evidence, this is not like anything on Earth. And I think you said the same thing last time we were talking, or something like, or I read this, you said this somewhere else. What's your take on the Shroud of Turin?
Well, when I first started researching it, I obviously thought it was going to be a medieval hoax. My theories were a lot like, or my thinking was a lot like other people. And then I really started looking into it, and I realized it was a 2,000-year-old artifact. And it is really the origin of where the New Testament story comes from. And if I would have said that 5 years ago, I would have laughed at myself. But researchers now can look at a painting or any sort of artwork and know exactly by the chemical compounds where it comes from, who made it, how exactly the painting was made. The Shroud is not like that. Nobody can tell you for sure how it was made. And I just researched the history for 5 years, and I know it's a 2,000-year-old artifact. And the biggest question to me is, this is the greatest proof of the New Testament story, and why is the church trying to cover this up for 1,700 years? Well, I think it's clear. It's the origin of the New Testament story, but who the Shroud is not Jesus of the New Testament. It was the Templars. The Templars had it. It was the greatest secret one could have against the church. It was why they were rounded up in 1307. And I've just put this whole story together over 5 years, and I thought I was crazy the first 2 years for even thinking this, and tried to debunk it, but all I found is more evidence to back up what I found originally.
Who looked after, if this is true, that the Shroud is 2,000 years old, do you have, did you trace the continuity? Because apparently it was lost for a few centuries. Do you have any?
It was lost between 325. It was lost between 325 and 544, and it's my stern belief that Eusebius, when he says that he had talked to the leaders of Edessa, Turkey, and he kind of puts out this false narrative and this silly story of what this image actually is. But I think the leaders of Rome marched into Edessa, Turkey, and said, "You put this artifact away, and if we ever see it again, Edessa will be wiped off the face of the map." So it goes hidden for about 225 years and then resurfaces in 544. And then Islam comes in and kind of story kind of flips, and it's a crazy story.
So, CFAPS, what's your opinion on, say, the Great Pyramid and its age, and maybe even the Sphinx as well?
I think they're about 11,200 years old. If you're 11,300 years old, I think after whatever happened about 11,600 years ago, and Plato gives that time, that's all up for speculation. But they went to Mesoamerica and they went to Egypt about that time, started building. Time as Göbekli Tepe monuments were built, and I think they built in grand fashion at Giza about 11,200 years ago.
11,200 years ago. Does that correspond to any weather phenomena at the time?
Well, there's all this ancient text saying, well, not all, but mostly coming from Plato, that something really bad happened 11,600 years ago. And then the survivors went to Mesoamerica in Egypt. And actually, there is a long count coming from the Mayans based on their astronomical calculations that is based on the planets that starts about 9,200 BC. And I think that's about the same time that the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid were built. I think the survivors of that cataclysm that happened about 9,600 BC, Egypt and Giza, or went to Mesoamerica and Giza at the same time. And Göbekli Tepe was built at the same time, so people can't scoff at saying, you know, nobody was building grand stuff at that time. Well, that's BS. They certainly were just a little north of there, Göbekli Tepe.
Interesting.
And I think at the Temple at Dendera, there's great hints in the text that even in the Dendera Zodiac, that the Egyptian civilization started at the start of the Age of Cancer, a little bit before, based on the way they symbolized how their chronology evolved.
Wow. And that corresponds to the Plato years?
Yes, and it directly involves the constellations that we see in the sky, and I think they were recognized as the familiar symbols we see them today, and I think that started around a little over 11,000 years ago. So I don't think there was ever an age of Leo where they were building stuff in Giza, 10,000 BC. I think it happened a little after that. That's why I don't think the Sphinx was ever a lion. The only alignment to the Sphinx is to the spring equinox. And if you build two alignments into a monument, that defeats the whole purpose of an alignment. An alignment is built to signify one specific thing and one thing only. And to the Sphinx, it was a spring equinox, and there is no hint from the Egyptians that they did a Leo lion alignment.
Awesome, awesome. I got maybe one or two more questions.
Mm-hmm.
What's the oldest civilization?
That's interesting. We have Gunung Padang in Indonesia, where they think there might be a pyramid 20,000 years old. There's Dwarka in India that, I don't know, sank beneath the sea, and God knows how old that is. I think Giza and Mesoamerica are about, 11, 12,000 years old. I think since we can't figure out really what went on 3,000, 4,000 years ago in Mesoamerica and Egypt, just questions like that, we are just throwing out wild guesses.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Well, I guess we'll start to wrap it up because we've been speaking for half an hour. But I've got one more question. Would you like to talk about something you'd like to leave the viewer with? Maybe where your latest research is, what your latest insights are, and where you hope to go from here.
Well, I might write a book, Charles, and I might look for you for some advice. I've got the Shroud mystery and the ancient American mystery, and I think I've got a lot of answers that maybe are unique to the subject. And especially in my Shroud research, everything that you see on the Shroud, is this a medieval hoax or is this the burial cloth of Jesus? Well, that's a terrible way to do research. I think you should look at more things than just that. And I think I have. And I'm pretty confident. Confidence has never been a problem in anything in my life. So I think I've gotten to the bottom of a few of these mysteries. And ancient American, the Shroud, those are things that really historians have failed us on. And I'm just determined to bring in the best research I can.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for researching so well. And I can't wait to read your Shroud book. That'll be absolutely incredible to get your insights into it.
Need to find the time. Need to find the right, proper time.
Indeed, indeed. And I can't wait to go on your tour as well. It's going to be amazing. And we will talk again soon.
All right, Charles.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.